Hello everyone from YouTube and welcome to the channel. This is Rob's Social Experiment and you are here to watch me write a novel. This is the first video in what's going to be a long series of videos in which I will write and publish on a weekly basis a new chapter in an as of yet unnamed full-length novel. If you're watching this video, it means you probably already watched my launch video in which I discuss exactly how this project is going to run and everything you need to know about it. If you haven't done so, consider checking it out by clicking on this link here at the top right hand corner of the screen. Now without anything further, it's time to go ahead and debut the first chapter titled Prologue. I thank you guys for being here and supporting this. I hope you stick with me through the entire process and I hope that you enjoy this first chapter. I have to admit I'm nervous about putting it out there because I don't know how it's going to be received. But there's really only one way to find out. So, here we go. Prologue. Prologue. Il Padrone stood motionless in the corner of the Academy's garden courtyard. The waiting had been difficult, very difficult. Even though it was almost the end of May, the night air was chilly and damp. He shivered as he zipped his blue jacket all the way up to his chin. Was he really shivering because of the cold? Or were his nerves starting to get the better of him? He didn't know. What he did know was that, except for his senile old assistant, the Academy's headmaster would be completely alone inside the imposing building. The Academy students had all left weeks ago. Fled was more like it. As much as they all fought and scratched to get into the place, once the school year ended, the students couldn't leave the Academy fast enough to get away from the relentless pressure of the place. Il Padrone stood obscured by the umbrella-like canopy of a Japanese red pine. From there, he had a view of the headmaster's study up above, as well as the ground floor faculty entrance. Finally, after nearly an hour of waiting, Il Padrone saw the stooped form of Elmer Dunn emerge from the building. Elmer was carefully working his way down the short flight of steps beneath the exit. The old assistant took his time as he maneuvered his way down the landing, clinging tightly to the step's metal railing. How long could it possibly take to go down 5 miserable little steps? A long time, apparently. Elmer was a nice man. Everyone loved him. But he was old, and those who knew him understood that he wasn't as sharp as he used to be. In fact, pretty much everyone believed the old man was going a bit crazy. Now that he had finally made his way down to the garden, Elmer looked back up the steps as if he couldn't remember if he was coming or going. Just when it looked as though he might start making his way back up the stairs, Elmer turned himself around and headed out of the garden. He was gone, and Il Padrone breathed a sigh of relief. With Elmer gone, Il Padrone peered up at the balcony of the headmaster's study, looking for what he knew would happen next. Moments later, as if on cue, the headmaster stepped out onto the balcony. He walked a few paces to the thick stone balustrade and leaned heavily against it as he stared out into the night. Although he couldn't tell for sure from his vantage point 5 stories below, Il Padrone knew that, in his left hand, the headmaster held a glass of fine brandy. It was the headmaster's custom to allow himself that luxury once the day was done and he was left alone with his thoughts. Tonight should be no exception. It was time to do what had to be done. Staying in the shadows, Il Padrone sidestepped his way inch by inch along the ivory-covered garden wall toward the Academy's rear entrance. The door to the rear entrance, which was illuminated from above by a small lamp, was just a few steps away. Il Padrone paused before stepping out into the light. He pulled the collar of his jacket up around his face and tugged his knit cap down, nearly covering his eyes. If anyone happened to be watching, they would have a hard time getting a good look at his face. He took one more cautious look around before venturing out of the garden wall's protective shadow. Of course there was nobody to see him bound up the landing to the outer door. He stuffed one of his gloved hands into his right jacket pocket, feeling for the key he had tucked away there. Once he had the key, his gloves made it difficult for him to work it into the lock. It didn't help matters that his hands wouldn't stop trembling. After fumbling with the key for what seemed like an eternity, he rotated the key clockwise, and the lock clicked open. Il Padrone stepped inside the building. He moved through the small room where the academy kept some of its books and office supplies and into the corridor beyond. The wide hallway was dark and deserted. Even in the gloom, he could not help but feel the sense of awe he felt every time he stepped foot in this building after having been away for a while. How many important people had walked these corridors over the course of 2 centuries? How many great men and women had gotten their start under the stone arches of the academy? More than he could name. Although he took great care to walk slowly and quietly toward the southern stairwell, his steps rang out loudly in his ears as his shoes clicked against the polished stone floors. In fact, he made almost no sound at all. It was only his imagination that magnified every sound and movement while his heart pounded relentlessly in his chest. He was at the stairwell now, and a few minutes later, after climbing 5 flights of stairs, he was standing silently at the door to the headmaster's study. From the doorway, he had a hard time seeing anything in the darkened room. Once his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he could see that the room itself was empty and that the headmaster was still on the balcony looking out into the night. Il Padrone slithered into the room. The study was lit by 2 wall sconces directly behind a large wooden desk that dominated the room. The headmaster must have dimmed the lights, which provided just enough illumination to prevent someone from walking into a wall or piece of furniture. The walls were lined with hundreds of leather-bound volumes placed neatly on shelves of ornately worked wood. The rich smell of the leather books filled the air. Il Padrone made his way cautiously to the darkest corner of the room. From there, he could see that the older man had turned so that he was now looking at his profile. The headmaster was staring blankly into his glass of brandy. By the looks of the full glass, he had yet to take a sip. The headmaster was a thin man of above average height. He was in his 50s and had the bearing of authority that came with decades of telling people what to do and how to do it. His sandy brown hair, which he kept cropped close, was flecked with gray, adding an undeniable air of distinction to the impressive man. His handsome face featured a straight, if perhaps somewhat prominent nose, a decisive-looking jaw, and bright blue eyes that hinted at the man's intensity and intelligence. The silent watcher smiled to himself as he noted that, even after a full day, there was not a crease or wrinkle visible on the man. He was the type of man who could roll down a muddy hill and get up without a mark on him. He was an aristocrat. Just now, however, he was looking older and somehow shrunken. The recent death of his eldest son must have taken a great toll on him. As he stood watching in the corner, Il Padrone tried desperately to calm his breathing. He took several deep, slow breaths to settle his frayed nerves. He knew what he had to do. He knew why he had to do it. But his feet would not move. Finally, with a huge effort, Il Padrone put some steel into his spine and willed himself out onto the balcony. He said nothing as the headmaster continued to look distractedly at his drink. Then, as if he could feel the eyes on the back of his neck, the older man turned around. He was startled as he saw his visitor for the first time. "Oh, it's you. What are you doing here?" "I'm back," said the younger man. "Yes, I see that," said the headmaster. "I'm just surprised to see you here at such a late hour." With a tired smile blossoming on his face, the headmaster stepped forward and clasped the newcomer's hand, giving it a firm shake. "I know it's kind of an odd time to visit," replied the younger man. "I just got back in town and felt I should come by and see you. I was sorry to hear about Jack." At the reminder of the death of his son, the headmaster's shoulders sunk and a visible wave of grief overcame him. "Yes, it was a terrible thing," said the headmaster, turning away from the younger man and looking out into the night. "I don't want to make you upset. I know you were planning to retire soon." "Well," said the headmaster, "there's no sense in thinking about that now. Jack was ready to step in for me, but, well—" The older man's words trailed off. "Who will you name as your replacement now?" asked the younger man. "I guess it'll have to be Winthrop, but it will be a while before he's ready." Looks like I'll have to soldier on for a few more years." At the mention of the headmaster's youngest son, the corners of the visitor's mouth quirked up in a sarcastic smile. "So it will be Win. Good old Winner. I doubt he's up to it." "Winthrop will do just fine," said the headmaster, somewhat puzzled by the younger man's disrespectful tone. "Look," said the headmaster, pinching the bridge of his nose, the way people do when they're dealing with a headache. "It's good to see you. You've just gotten back, and it's late. Let's talk about this during business hours. It's about time for me to go home. Ellie will no doubt be waiting for me. Lately, it seems I just need more and more time with my brandy." "Why would I leave? I just got here," said the younger man with a smirk on his face. The headmaster turned to look at his visitor. He colored upon seeing the insolent expression on the younger man's face. "What's going on here? Am I missing something?" he said, looking directly into the younger man's eyes. "I'm sorry," replied the visitor. "Don't be upset with me. I was wondering about the twins." "Twins? What twins?" asked the headmaster. "The Saldana twins," replied the visitor. "I'm wondering whether or not they're being invited back this year." "Oh," said the headmaster. "Yes, the Saldanas. The board has voted to invite them both back. They're both incredibly impressive students. There's no doubt they deserve to be admitted to the academy." The visitor whistled. "Wow, that'll be something. A set of twins at the academy. That's a first, isn't it?" "Indeed it is," replied the headmaster with his usual dignified air. "Why are you so interested in the Saldana twins?" "Oh, I don't know," replied the visitor. "What do you think about it?" "About what?" asked the headmaster. "About the twins. Isn't it interesting that a set of twins are going to be attending the academy?" The headmaster looked at his visitor with real interest. "What do I think about twins attending the academy?" repeated the headmaster. "Why, nothing at all. The fact that they're twins is of no importance. They each stand alone on their own merit, and each is deserving of a place at our school. Indeed, we should consider ourselves lucky to have them." The visitor shook his head as the headmaster spoke. "Come on now. How can you say that the fact that they're twins is of no importance? I seem to recall reading somewhere that a long time ago someone predicted that there would be a set of twins admitted into the academy. From what I remember, the arrival of the twins is supposed to be a pretty big deal." The headmaster stiffened at the visitor's remarks. He didn't like the turn the conversation had taken, and he was growing increasingly alarmed. "What on earth are you talking about?" asked the headmaster, doing his best to appear calm and collected. "Please don't pretend you don't know what I mean. Really, Mr. Appleton, it's beneath your dignity." "How do you know all of this?" asked the headmaster. "Let's just say I've read a lot of the same books that you have." "But how?" "Don't worry about that," replied the visitor casually. "Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about Wynne becoming headmaster. That's a funny idea, if you ask me." "You'll forgive me if I fail to see the humor in our conversation," said the headmaster. The visitor could see the hurt and confusion on the older man's face. "I realize you must still be upset because of Jack," replied the visitor with a careless air. "But you must surely see the humor in your entrusting the care of this great institution to Wynne. How long will it be before he starts installing hot tubs on the grounds and organizing frisbee tournaments?" The younger man chuckled at his own jest. The headmaster took a moment to bring his rising temper under control before responding. "I don't know what this is about, or what's gotten into you, but I'm willing to start fresh on Monday. So, why don't you go out the same way you came in, and I'll forget this conversation ever happened." There was that headmaster tone that made the future leaders of the world quake in their shoes. Now that he had set events in motion, the younger man was relieved to find that there was no longer any trace of the fear and doubt that had plagued him as he stood sentinel in the garden. It was true that the younger man admired the headmaster. Certainly the older man had done great things and important work. But who did this man think he was? What gave this man and his family the right to take all of the power for themselves at the exclusion of everyone else? "I'm really not ready to leave. I'd rather talk about how your goofball son, Wynne, is going to run this place into the ground." The headmaster stared at his visitor in utter disbelief. "By the time Winthrop takes over, he will be ready. As far as my offer to further discuss this topic on Monday, you can forget about that. You're not stepping foot in this institution ever again. so take your leave, or I'll throw you out myself." With that, the headmaster heartily turned his back on his visitor, as if he had already dismissed him from his thoughts. "Actually," said the intruder, "good old Winter is going to be starting his new job a little sooner than you expect. It turns out that your time at the academy is up. Now why don't you go ahead and throw me out like you promised?" At that, the headmaster spun on his heel and came at the young man with a speed and fury that startled him. The headmaster seized the younger man's arm. In that instant, it was as if the headmaster's will to fight, argue, or do anything at all completely drained from his body. He stood motionless with a stunned and confused look on his face. The younger man removed the headmaster's limp hand from around his arm and smoothed out the sleeve of his blue jacket. "I can see by the look on your face that you're confused. Let me see if I can clear things up for you. Those books, the ones that predict the arrival of the twins, don't they also predict the arrival of someone else? Surely you must know who I mean." The headmaster's eyes opened wide in shock as his mouth worked silently for a few moments. "What did you say? What?" he said, fumbling his words. "You heard me," replied the visitor coldly. "You know who I am. Tell me who I am," he commanded. "Il Padrone," said the headmaster. "You. It can't be. You're just a child. It can't be." The words came out like a whisper. "Yes, Il Padrone, at your service." He accompanied the remarks with a mocking bow. The headmaster stared at the younger man with a look of open disbelief. Neither man spoke for a moment until Il Padrone broke the silence. "You and all of your family are the same. You have no faith and believe in nothing apart from your own personal wealth and ambition. You don't deserve the great power and position you've been given. It's an injustice I'll be rectifying." Il Padrone stepped away from the headmaster, turning his back to him for a moment and hesitating before turning around to face him again. "Let me ask you this. Did you really think that Jack's death was just a boating accident?" The headmaster swayed on his feet as the words hit him like hammer blows. "Of course it wasn't an accident, but it had to look like one. You understand, don't you?" Without realizing he was doing so, the headmaster nodded his head weakly. "I'm going to break your family's grip on this place. Wynne isn't qualified to run the academy. He'll realize that for himself and come asking for help. That's when we'll take over. But we had to get your son Jack out of the way. Jack was a whole different story. I have no doubt he would have made a great headmaster." "Well, I don't have to worry about him anymore. But you're still here. I have to do something about that, don't I? Well, let me ask you this. How can you go on living now that you know your son was killed in cold blood? He was only 26 years old, he had a brilliant future, and now he's dead. That's hard to take, isn't it? You can't live with that, can you?" The headmaster shook his head slowly from side to side, his eyes revealing the terror and agony roiling inside of him. "I think there's a way out for you," said Il Padrone cruelly. "I think you should climb up on this railing here and jump down into your beautiful garden. All of life's problems gone in an instant. Of course, it would be rude for you to simply leave without any sort of explanation. So, before you jump, why don't you go to your desk and write a note explaining how you just can't go on living now that your oldest son is no longer here to take your place. Feel free to add details if you like." The headmaster stood stock still. "Do it!" hissed Il Padrone. The headmaster winced at the shrill command as tears came flooding into his eyes and rolled down his face. He wanted to charge at his tormentor or run out of the room. Instead, he walked to his desk, his legs taking him there as if against his will. Taking up a pen, he wrote the following words on a sheet of his personal stationery. "When Jack died, so did I." Il Padrone peered down at the note. "It appears that you're a man of few words. Why don't you sign that note? It's more official that way." The headmaster signed the note. "One more thing before you go," said Il Padrone. "I need your ring. Please be so kind as to get it for me." At those words, a defiant grin turned up the corners of the headmaster's mouth. "Since you seem to know so much, you must also know that there is no way for me to get that ring for you." "Yes, well, it never hurts to ask," replied the younger man icily. I suppose it's time for you to go then. Il Padrone's words, although cruel, contained a hint of regret. Once again, betrayed by a body that no longer seemed to recognize him as its owner, the headmaster slowly approached the railing. Not daring to look down, he climbed unsteadily atop the thick stone. Without another glance back, he stepped out into space. An instant later, his broken body lay inert on the stone garden floor. Il Padrone looked down at the fallen leader before he flicked up the collar of his blue jacket and headed for the door. Well, folks, that's one chapter down, many more to go. I hope that at least somebody out there enjoyed some aspect of that. If you're interested in more content related to this particular chapter, how it was written, and so forth, click on the video that's linked up here in the top right-hand corner of the screen. That's a short discussion video where I talk about my mindset and the different things that I was taking into consideration as I wrote that chapter. So if you want to take a look behind the scenes, so to speak, check that video out. As for this video, I hope that you liked it. I enjoyed making it. It was kind of a big thrill to get this project underway. But I can already tell this is going to be a difficult project and a very long haul. So if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, comment, share it with your friends, and subscribe. Every subscriber is going to help me. I'm going to need the support. And the more and more people that get behind this, the more sure I'll become that I'll make it all the way to the end. So that's one chapter down. There'll be a video like this every week. So the next one will be next Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And every video after that, on a week-by-week basis, will come out at 4 p.m. on Saturdays until we have a complete novel. So thank you for sticking around to the end of the video, and I'm off to the next one. See you there.